Canada's secret '88 Gripen deal, the Nordic alliance that could reshape global air power. Two defense giants are locked in the most consequential battle for Canada's military future in half a century. Sweden's Saab Gripen versus America's Lockheed Martin F-35. Prime Minister Mark Carney stunned Washington by ordering a complete review of the multi-billion-dollar F-35 contract amid escalating trade tensions with the United States. The Trump administration deployed 10 F-35 fighter jets to Puerto Rico as part of military operations against drug cartels in the Caribbean. Britain's National Audit Office released a damning report revealing the Royal Air Force's F-35 fleet achieved only 50% mission capability, far below targets. And in Alaska, an F-35 crashed after its hydraulic fluid froze at -17 degrees Celsius, destroying a $196 million aircraft in a fireball captured on video worldwide. What is really happening with Canada's secret '88 Gripen deal with Sweden? Before anyone noticed, something profound began shifting inside Canada's defense establishment. Not with announcements or fanfare, but with quiet, deliberate precision. A strategic transformation unfolding behind secure doors, methodical and calculated, as if the nation were finally assembling the pieces of a future it has been denied for generations. What appears like indecision from the outside is actually the focused discipline of a country preparing to make the most consequential defense choice of its modern history. For decades, Canadians accepted an unwritten rule. Washington would present its preferred aircraft, defense contractors would mobilize, political pressure would intensify, and Canada, often reluctantly, would align with American expectations. That pattern defined Canadian procurement for as long as anyone could remember. But something fundamental changed. Canada paused. Canada refused to be rushed. And Canada began exploring a direction that stunned even the most experienced defense analysts. What critics dismissed as delay was actually something far more significant. A nation rediscovering its voice and its sovereign right to choose independently. Inside Ottawa, a different atmosphere now dominates. Teams of engineers, military strategists, and procurement specialists have been conducting evaluations unlike anything seen before. These are not ceremonial reviews. These are exhaustive technical examinations of what Canada genuinely requires for the next 50 years of Arctic patrols, northern sovereignty missions, continental defense obligations, and genuine strategic autonomy. The people driving these assessments are not thinking in election cycles. They are thinking in generations. At the center of this transformation stands the Saab Gripen, the fighter jet that establishment voices once dismissed as too modest, too unconventional, too independent to challenge American industrial dominance. For years, critics underestimated it. They called it the outsider. They were profoundly wrong. The very characteristics that caused skeptics to overlook the Gripen are precisely what makes it extraordinary for Canada. This aircraft was engineered for nations that refuse to surrender sovereignty for capability. It was designed for countries that must defend enormous, unforgiving territory with limited resources. It was built for governments that demand complete control over their own military systems. As Canada's classified evaluations progressed, the strategic logic became undeniable. The Gripen aligns with Canadian requirements almost perfectly. It launches from short, unpaved runways. It operates flawlessly in extreme cold. It requires minimal ground support. Its operating costs rank among the lowest of any modern fighter, approximately $7,000 to $12,000 per flight hour compared to the F-35's $33,000 to $50,000. And most critically, Canada would own it completely. No foreign software locks, no mandatory approvals from Washington for weapons integration, no external control over mission planning. Full sovereignty. Recent events made that distinction dramatically relevant. An F-35 crashed at Eielson Air Force Base in Alaska after hydraulic fluid contaminated with water froze in extreme cold temperatures, preventing the landing gear from deploying. The pilot, a veteran with over 2,200 flight hours, spent 50 minutes on a conference call with Lockheed Martin engineers attempting to troubleshoot. He ejected safely at just 372 feet above the runway. The $196 million aircraft spiraled before stalling and crashing in a fireball. Just 9 days later, another F-35 at the same base experienced an identical hydraulic freezing malfunction. The investigation revealed systemic maintenance failures and improper storage of hydraulic fluids. For a nation with vast Arctic territories requiring year-round air defense, these incidents demanded serious attention. The Gripen, by contrast, was specifically designed for Swedish winters in Lapland, routinely operating at -40 degrees Celsius. Its maintenance philosophy emphasizes simplicity and rapid turnaround with minimal crew. Swedish Air Force technicians can turn around a Gripen in 10 minutes on an icy road with a skeleton crew. 88 aircraft. That number represents far more than a procurement quantity. For Canadians who remember the Avro Arrow, cancelled over 6 decades ago, it carries emotional weight that outsiders cannot fully grasp. But here is what most observers missed. Canada is currently committed to purchasing only 16 F-35s. The remaining 72 are under active review. And the projected cost has ballooned from roughly $19 billion to over $30 billion when full operational capability is included. This is why Sweden's approach resonated so powerfully in Ottawa. Stockholm did not arrive with a conventional sales pitch. They arrived with a partnership proposal unlike anything Canada has encountered. Swedish King Carl XVI. Gustav and Queen Sylvia recently led a delegation of over 60 industry representatives to Canada, accompanied by Deputy Prime Minister Ebba Busch and Defense Minister Paul Johnson. Prime Minister Carney met the royal delegation and announced the two nations were signing a strategic partnership extending across defense, trade, and environment. I believe that in difficult times you should really choose your friends wisely, and this is the reason Sweden is choosing Canada, Deputy Prime Minister Bush declared during the visit. Industry Minister Melanie Joly publicly stated that Saab's offer to create 10,000 Canadian jobs was an interesting proposition. She criticized the F-35 contract directly. I don't believe that we have had enough jobs created and industrial benefits done out of the F-35 contract. I think it is not enough. Saab CEO Mikael Johansson confirmed negotiations with both Ottawa and Bombardier to build Gripen fighters under license in Canada. The project would include technology transfer, a research network for drones, and potentially make Canada Saab's third global production site after Sweden and Brazil. Bombardier confirmed its openness to partnership, though its CEO admitted he has not independently verified Saab's job creation numbers. International demand for the Gripen has exploded. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson signed a historic letter of intent for Ukraine to purchase between 100 and 150 Gripen E fighters, the largest European fighter deal in Ukrainian history. First deliveries expected within the next year. Ukrainian officials announced plans to localize Gripen production on Ukrainian territory within the decade. Sweden is not simply selling aircraft. Sweden is building an alliance of nations committed to strategic independence. The strategic picture sharpened dramatically when Radio Canada obtained classified data from Canada's Future Fighter Capability Project evaluation. The F-35 scored 57.1 out of 60 points. The Gripen scored 19.8. On mission performance, the F-35 achieved 97% versus Gripen's 22%. But context matters enormously. That evaluation compared a hypothetical Block 4 F-35 that remains, according to the U.S. Government Accountability Office, over 5 years behind schedule and more than $6 billion over budget. The F-35's real-world mission capability, according to a Congressional Budget Office study, hovers between 50 and 60%. The Gripen achieves 80 to 90% availability. And critically, that evaluation was conducted before Sweden joined NATO, gaining access to interoperability protocols that significantly enhance the Gripen's compatibility with alliance systems. Former RCAF commander Lieutenant General Yvon Blondin argued that the F-35 remains superior. If we send our sons and daughters into combat, it will be in these aircraft. If you put them in an F-35 against Chinese or Russian jets in the Arctic, the aircraft scores 95%. If you put them in a Gripen, it's 33%. But former Major General Charles Sullivan countered that the Canadian Project Office has always favored the F-35 and that evaluation criteria were tailored accordingly. The process was not transparent, Saab Canada President Simon Carroll stated. The requirements were tailored to exclude competition. Global events forced Ottawa to fundamentally reassess its defense posture. The Arctic has transformed into one of the world's most contested strategic zones. At the International Arctic Forum in Murmansk, President Putin announced Russia would increase military personnel in the Arctic and modernize northern infrastructure. Russia sealed large portions of the Barents Sea for major military exercises with Belarus, practicing cruise missile launches over Arctic waters. Meanwhile, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security reported an unprecedented number of Chinese military and research vessels operating in or near U.S. Arctic waters. Multiple Chinese vessels spent extensive time on the American extended continental shelf and conducted nearly 4 dozen manned submersible dives across the Arctic Ocean. Chinese and Russian long-range bombers have patrolled jointly near Alaska. The Arctic is no longer a frozen frontier. It is becoming a theater of great power competition. Finland and Sweden both joined NATO, transforming the alliance's northern flank. Suddenly, 7 of 8 traditional Arctic nations belong to NATO. A Nordic-Canadian defense architecture emerged as a realistic strategic framework. These countries share Canada's challenges: brutal climates, vast distances, remote installations, the absolute need for operational independence. A dozen retired senior RCAF officers reportedly sent a letter urging Ottawa to proceed with all 88 F-35s, warning that a mixed fleet would create operational and logistical nightmares. But many of NATO's largest countries successfully operate dual fleets. Italy flies both F-35s and Eurofighter Typhoons. So does Britain. For those who remember the Avro Arrow, this moment resonates deeply. That program represented everything Canada could have achieved in military aviation. Its cancellation left a wound in national industrial memory that never fully healed. Now, over 6 decades later, an opportunity has emerged to write a different chapter. If Canada selects a significant Gripen component, it joins a new model of air power cooperation. Not an alliance built on dominance, but a partnership founded on shared challenges, shared operating philosophies, and shared determination to control national destiny. A Nordic-Canadian cluster, offering an alternative to centralized American frameworks. This choice would transform more than the Royal Canadian Air Force. It would reshape Canada's global identity. It would announce to allies and adversaries alike that Canada is no longer content as a junior partner. U.S. Ambassador Pete Hoekstra recently expressed frustration over Canada's continued indecision, saying the debate was personally irritating and hoping Canada would make a final decision soon. Washington wants commitment. Ottawa wants independence. As the final phase approaches, the true meaning becomes undeniable. This decision is more than aircraft. It is a declaration. Canada will defend its Arctic with technology purpose-built for Canadian realities. Canada will invest in its own aerospace sector. Canada will stand as a sovereign nation capable of independent defense decisions. The world has changed, and Canada is changing with it. When Ottawa announces its decision, the silence that preceded it will finally be understood, not as hesitation, but as the focused resolve of a sovereign nation shaping its own destiny. If you found this analysis valuable, like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. The global defense landscape is shifting faster than ever. The next major development may already be unfolding. Stay informed. Stay ahead.